Hello, everyone. Hopefully, everybody can see us as we work through. This is our inaugural um, influencer session being presented from and by soarinc.com. And I wanted to take the opportunity to introduce Sydney Tetro, who is with us today to talk about women in AI. And Sydney has just an amazing background in supporting women in that regard and in technology all the way around. In fact, Sydney is a tech luminary recognized in 2023 as EY's Entrepreneur of the Year, a visionary in technology and a vanguard for women in tech. She recently grew a company from 1.5 million to 100 million in 24 months. In addition, raising 118 million in capital, a record for women in Silicon Slopes. Founded, sold, and operated as CEO, an additional 3 technology companies, from 3D printing to AI to digital transformation, with solutions that help drive an additional 1 billion in growth for companies like Verizon and Microsoft. She has partnered with some of the biggest brands, including Marvel, Star Wars, the NFL, MLB, Target, Walmart, to create tech products. Sydney also founded the Women Tech Council. With 2 patents and numerous awards, she is a beacon of leadership in today's tech industry. So we wanted to welcome you, Sydney, to our discussion today. And we look forward to learning so much about what you've been able to do already and how you see how women can continue to advance in technology. What were your initial thoughts and how did you want to start and bridge the conversation, Sydney, with respect to where you see the status of women in technology and certainly AI today in 2024?
Thanks. I'm excited to be here. We were talking about this a little bit before. I think everyone would say that AI is probably one of the largest technology transformations that we probably have ever seen. Um, and I think one of the interesting things about AI is it's starting to change the types of skill sets that we need as an industry. And I think it's opening doors for other ways and other pathways for people to come into technology, and particularly women. A lot of the AI work, we're seeing a lot of women who are entering the field in data science. Data science is a fairly new industry. Because if you think about it, for a long time, it was really computer science, computer engineering, information technology, disciplines where traditionally seen fewer women. Actually, the numbers today are even less than when I went through my computer science degree. And we haven't really made monumental strides in increasing significantly those numbers. But as technology has expanded into other disciplines like data science, we have seen more women going into those fields. And data science is one of those really interesting foundations for AI, because a lot of what is happening in AI is a correlation between data and insights that's then unlocking the ability to create new original content, complex tasks, insights. I see this time and time again. And so I think it's going to be a really interesting effort over the next couple of years to see how much we can impact women going into more of the STEM fields or more of the technology fields, because now there are so many other ways that you can participate in technology versus just what was perceived historically as just programming.
Right, right. And do you think that the colleges and the universities are catching up and are in fact starting to take advantage of those changes such that they can attract more of these young ladies to come in?
So we've seen in our university ecosystems a lot of adoption of more data science types classes. Obviously, you're seeing more technical classes even in the Python space. So I feel like we've seen a fair, and cybersecurity has actually been another really big bucket of innovation that universities, I think, have nicely adapted to. AI is one of the fastest moving technologies we've seen. If you watch the stream of announcements that come almost every day in innovation, it is faster than anything that we've ever seen. So the gap that we have collectively, even in talent, is how do you stay on top of everything that's happening? I mean, if you watch the evolution that we went from even 18 months ago, just the initial kind of chat GPT coming out, and then where we're at today, all the announcements from even Microsoft yesterday, all of the announcements of the voice platforms that are now becoming available, the speed is so quickly. So we are not matching that speed in all of our training and our education. It's one of the gaps we have. And the gap isn't just in universities, the gap is going to be also in the skill sets of our team members inside of our organizations because the pace is so fast. I think one of the things I hear all the time about technology companies is technology companies typically move at a faster speed of business than maybe traditional businesses have. But in a world where all companies are becoming technology companies, because there isn't a company that you can go into today that isn't fundamentally driven by innovation and technology, they're having to increase their speed of business. This is a big evolution. And then you layer on the speed of AI innovation on top of that. And there's a lot of disruption that we're really ripe for, which is interesting. And I think a really big opportunity. And I think you're going to see a lot of disruption. Those companies that can jump into the speed and can move their businesses into the speed of how innovation evolves, I think are going to have a competitive advantage as we go in the future.
Is it fair to say that AI then becomes a faster, shorter ramp for entrance into technology for many women today, especially young ladies?
I think it can definitely have that opportunity. It was interesting. I had a panel yesterday of 8 women in technology. Half of them had computer science undergrads. Some of them are in data science, some of them are in Scrum Masters, some of them are in product management. When I asked them the question, like, what's the single most interesting innovation that you think is available today? Everyone across the board said AI. So that's interesting because in the past you would get, different things from maybe robotics or some of the hardware innovations. But there wasn't one person who didn't say the way the world is changing is through AI. And so I think that creates a lot of opportunities that didn't exist previously.
Right. And what do you think some of the more traditional obstacles for ladies in technology, are they still creating some of the same barriers even as it relates to AI? So when we talk about disparities of pay, or we talk about some of the other challenges that exist in technology, are they basically the same, and are those still obstacles we need to address?
Oh, there's a lot of obstacles in this glass ceiling challenge. So I tend to think about the obstacles across the entire talent pipeline. So I think about it at every stage of the talent pipeline in technology. Sorry, there are different challenges that we have to address. And I think those different challenges present different problems for us, some of which get unlocked in different ways, like when new innovation comes, and some that are barriers that are as like old as the industry is that take more work to solve. So when we look at, so I kind of separate it from high school to the boardroom. And when you go and you start in the high school domain, the high school girls tell us that the reason that they don't go into STEM fields is particularly because they have no role models and they know no women in STEM.
Hmm.
So while we teach them HTML, send them to all the CTE programs, they do not choose STEM fields because they've never seen a woman who has gone into those fields. And when we survey them, 90% will tell you they know no women in STEM. And so because of that, they can't see what they can't become. And so a lot of that high school pipeline work that is happening is around how do you give them role models? How do you give them mentors? And we have seen a difference. I'm participating in a program called She Tech. We've had about 40,000 high school girls go through this program. And we know when we give them mentors and role models, it's changing the number of girls who are going in to pursue additional education inside of STEM. Now, when you get into the education experience, there's a whole other gap because we have very few female faculty inside of any of our STEM degrees. So this is another big focus that we think about because they need role models inside of those. Now, I was one of 3 women in my graduating computer science class. There are very few women in that ecosystem, and we need more of them. So this role model game is really important. And a lot of work is happening right now inside of the universities, mentorship programs, but even with faculties, because that's how you change those numbers. Now, when you get into the workforce is also very complex. So we have only 5% of executives in technology companies that are women. And only about 21% of the workforce, 21 to 25%, depending on what region you're in, is the average of women in technology. Women make up 50% of the workforce. And when you think about things like AI, the reason it's so imperative that we have diverse voices is because we're training systems based on knowledge. And that knowledge, that historical knowledge, which then informs what it knows and what it can become, needs diverse voices. It needs women, it needs people of color, it needs different backgrounds and different cultures in order to be smart enough to not create bias in the outcomes that it is creating. And so it's super important that we solve all of these problems by creating more diverse voices and pathways. We have yet to solve all the barriers that exist for women in technology. But by the pure fact that only 5% sit in executive roles, it tells you the barriers are real. It tells you that there's gates at every stage of that. And part of it comes because of the cultures of the companies that have grown up. It's already proven that if you have more than one woman, if you have two women in your executive team, those companies have traditionally outperformed in revenue and profits. So the data backs up having very diverse teams. One person's not enough. You have to have more than one. But the challenge is those barriers are much harder to break because the ecosystem around you doesn't have the same level of diversity. We actually interestingly have solved in the tech world some of the board level diversity problems, gender diversity problems, because they've been mandated from states, from laws to say go add more women on boards. That has not directly translated to leadership teams inside of technology companies. And so we still have plenty of glass to break along the way in order to create changes and create parity at every stage of the talent pipeline, at every stage of the career growth.
Is there a particular area of entry that's more attractive and faster for more ladies and women to get involved in? In other words, a level of entry?
So we're actually doing, I feel like, a pretty good job at early entry into the manager, senior manager. We tend to, I think we're doing a much better job at solving some of those talent pipeline challenges, getting girls interested into those degrees, demonstrating to them that technology includes everything from user experience to product management to data science. There's lots and lots of ways to get involved. And that is allowing them to pathway into early jobs. We have yet to solve the progression, the career advancement for women at the same pace as their male counterparts.
Right. Well, I know you and I were talking a little earlier before we went live, and we were talking about some of the announcements that Microsoft made yesterday. And you had a couple of slides that I just thought were amazing with respect to the changes and the opportunities in AI. Did you want to show and talk a little bit further about that as well?
Yeah, I think we were talking a little bit about what is AI doing in the as it changes like talents and skills, which I think is a really interesting conversation. So there's two slides that I think would be really interesting for the audience to see. So this was actually shared from Satya yesterday, the Microsoft CEO, when Microsoft made a bunch of announcements. I think this is a really nice summary, and I'm just going to use this as context to thinking about skill set. So one of the things that's really happened with AI, which is leading to where you're talking about these change in our skill sets and our change in really the types of jobs that we're going to need in the future, and really the roles that we're all going to need to upskill in. Because what's happening with AI is you're now getting to this place where any type of input is available: text, video, photo, audio, you name a type of input, there's this universal way to get that in. I mean, if anyone watched the really interesting debate recently with Scarlett Johansson and the release of the voice, on Chat GPT, and the copy that her kind of feeling like they were using her voice without her approval, it just demonstrates that there's all these universal interfaces. What AI has that we've never had before is memory and context. If you think about what your Google search looked like even 3 years ago, when you did your Google search, it just gave you page results. It had no memory, it had no context. It might have told you top suggested pages, but it didn't remember what you asked before. It didn't have context of the moment that you're in. But that's what we have with AI, is this learning that says any way this information comes in, now I've got context. And then that in and of itself with memory and context creates a building system for reasoning and planning that we've never had before. So if you pull that thread through and you think about what skill sets become really important and critical in this new world, they're starting to change. So the World Economic Forum did an analysis on the top 10 skills on the rise from their Future of Jobs report. And this is really interesting because for a very long time, the top skill on the rise was based in technology. It was based on learning skills and technology. And what is happening, and part of it is because of that, what's happening in that last slide, which is there are now these layers that are sitting above where we used to be thinking, about technology and the level that you needed, where what we really need are brilliant, creative, thinking minds that are analytical, that are using these systems to direct behavior. And that's evident by this is a top skill. I mean, I often have said the top skill I hire for is creative problem solving because you can almost teach any other skill. What's becoming true is that is the skill that we need in order to really utilize AI inside of our companies for the outcomes that we want. Now, I think this is just going to continue to elevate. These skills are going to continue to get mixed up. And what we're going to see is that AI becomes these engines that we now have to apply a different skill set to that we didn't have to before. I'm actually seeing that in my work in lots of different places. One of those is even in just sales forecasting. It used to be there was lots of systems around sales forecasting, but sales forecasting is one of the most interesting places that AI has been applied because if you have large companies with sophisticated pricing models, forecasting gets really complex because you have outlets, you have disparate locations, you have all sorts of different variables coming into play. And then if you're large companies that have time series data over time, you know where 90% of your revenue is coming from. But now you're trying to figure out, especially if you're like a company that produces products, what's your demand planning? What's your supply planning? What are innovations that might come in that disrupt those patterns? What's seasonality data that you want to go? And so Facebook actually created a model called Profit, which is an open source model. There's a Python version of it that takes time series data and creates a whole AI engine that people are abstracting on top of, which is creating significantly greater accuracy in core forecasts so that organizations can figure out then where they apply their resources to alter what the forecast says with the predictability of that. And we're seeing this type of work in all sorts of things. And what that means is the skills that you need to think about what you're learning from using AI in a forecast are now different than just saying, how do I go program a spreadsheet in order to take the inputs? You're at a whole other layer of your critical thinking.
Is it not true that most of the talent with respect to the kinds of individuals that would put that in place, whether it be for a company that makes products or distribution or otherwise, is being outsourced today because of the lack of resources?
Oh, that's interesting. Meaning I don't internally have enough technology resources to solve
Right.
this problem.
Irrespective
Yeah,
of whether they be male or female.
yeah, that's it. It's an interesting question. I think one of the evolutions that I'm seeing, we've been talking about digital transformation for kind of the last, 8 to 10 years on organizations. And digital transformation means many different things to many different people. For some people, it just meant e-commerce. But one of the things that's true is AI is really shoring up that every organization is a technology company. I actually had this question on a panel internet when I was out of the country last week, which was, do traditional companies what do they start to look like? Like, can they really become, have digital transformation? The answer is 100%. Every company is now a tech company. Every company, in order to have competitive advantage, has to use innovation at the core of who they are. And what that means is whatever the competitive skill set you need, you actually have to have that talent internally to your organization. You can create scale from using some outsourced resources in the right ways, but as an organization, you have to know how to use technology to create your advantage. Or I think you're going to be faced with the innovator's dilemma, which is, you will face disruption if you cannot move at the same speed that innovation is coming, and that if you do not incorporate the right competitive components into your business plan.
Which is very difficult to do if you don't recognize the type of resources you need in the first place, right?
That's right.
Um,
I also that's and I'm just going to add into that insight because one of the other things that I've had this realization of the last couple of months is a lot of times traditional companies think about technology as their IT infrastructure. And they
Right.
haven't really had to think about it like a tech company, but tech companies think about innovation like products. They think about them as things you maintain and support, living, breathing organisms of the organization, roadmaps. Well, to build stuff like that needs people who think like product.
Right.
They think technology products, they think user experience, they think adoption. This is a skill set traditional businesses have never had to have. But when you start to deploy AI, you have to start thinking differently because you're actually creating products that have meaningful impact on a business. And that skill set is one that organizations who are not traditionally tech companies have never had to develop.
Right. And it makes me wonder if at this point, given the explosive nature of the need at every level, if there doesn't need to be additional mechanisms by which we help people get trained in that respect. That is to say, those end companies that need the resources, in addition to the outsourced companies, need to be developing and creating those resources and talents themselves, as opposed to waiting for universities and colleges to bring them forward. I think there needs to be a
Yeah,
much more
I
aggressive
I
position.
agree. Yeah, I think collectively, actually with companies and universities, because they're really great at creating that education, we've got to
Right,
create much stronger partnerships in
right.
order to say that the skills that we're teaching are the ones that the businesses need for implementation and the speed of change of making sure that we're actually getting those skills interjected into our people are critically important. Although if you go back to the World Economic Forum, if you believe that analytical and creative thinking are at the top, that is one thing that our education institutions are really great at doing is
Mhm.
teaching you how to think and teaching you how to learn. Those are some of the most critical skills because innovation is going to continue to move so quickly. If you have those skills, you can probably pick up a lot of the innovation at the speed that it's moving.
And then it's just a question of aligning that with
That's
the
right.
end with the outputs in order to make that effective. And therein
Yep.
again comes in that question: is there a fair balance between women and men by way of their access to those opportunities? And that's a question that we have to ask at both of those levels, right? And it seems to me that many businesses today still see through a very myopic point of view that needs to be broadened in order for them to be successful and for everybody else to develop all those resources.
That's right. For sure. I think just ha just by the nature that the world is changing will not change access to opportunity. The question around access to opportunity requires so many other levers to change. I often talk about the fact that one of the most rapid ways that we can rapidly change the levers are for those sponsors and those people in power to actually pull, like drive the change. Like it really has to come top down. You need the people who can sit in those rooms and say, yep, this is how we're going to make sure that we build our teams. This is kind of how we make sure that we put input in. This is how we're going to recruit talent. This is the culture that we're going to create in our company. I mean, all of those things become the most critical components in order to making sure that you have strong, diverse teams that are actually solving your problems.
And we're seeing that today. So today's successful technology companies are doing just that, right? And they're
That's
becoming
right.
more and more effective with respect to that. And we can name any number of them. One of them we know well is Embark, and they're doing a fabulous job of just that and building a culture around that philosophy and growing like crazy because of it, right?
That's right.
And those are great examples.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great example. It's just a perfect example of there's a couple things happening. Technology is changing and our workforce is changing. The
Yes.
expectations the workforce has for how they show up, the companies that they want to work for, how they think about their learning journey inside of companies is significantly different than it was a decade ago. And to your point, it now, as those companies, the ones that are being able to attract, retain, and create competitive advantage are creating adjustments for both innovation and people. And you need that innovation and people component in order to create a successful outcome.
So let's talk about the reality today. So if you're whether you be a manufacturing company or a service company or distribution, what are some of the best ways that you can access resources and develop resources in order to bring AI truly into your business to have the impact that we're talking about?
I think so. I have a couple of kind of theories around like things that companies should be investing in or ways that they should think about organization. I really think that organizations have to have the space. So if we're not a tech company, right, and we're trying to figure this stuff out, we have to have almost an R&D capability on innovation. The ability to say, we don't know all the answers, but we know that innovation is critical to our future. And figuring out what the top priorities are or levers of the business are, and then figuring out how that innovation can map to them, I think is a very interesting way to go. Because you can almost apply AI to anything. But the way that you prove that it's the right investment for a company is really understanding what's most important to a business and using AI to then help accelerate solutions to those challenges or those opportunities. The reason I was even mentioning AI forecasting is because you have fixed number of resources and you're trying to figure out like, where your sales team should focus in order to hit your numbers. And the more that you can use innovation to do that, the more likely you are to know where your gaps are. Or, in cases like merchandising, seen a ton of AI in merchandising for things like displays inside of stores. Like, oh, does this display get the volume of traffic that we need? Do we move enough products inside of that? Well, if I can use photo recognition, 3D mapping, and financial insights to tell me sales velocity of merchandising inside of a store, I start to be able to use technology to figure out where my people spend their time. I understand what my competition's doing. I understand the share or the percentage that I have. I understand the volatility in any specific company. We ran a bunch of really interesting correlation data that even said things like, you know, in this store, you should add more displays because for every display you add, it drives more revenue. In this store, you should stop adding displays because no more revenue gets added for every display that you go fix. And so the ability for you to optimize resources to drive whatever the outcome is for your company, if you can apply AI to those areas where you know there's the biggest difference for your company if you spend time, that's really important. Now, other places are also in your talent, right? We talk a lot about people. The ability for us to now use AI to help our people learn skills in more rapid places because they can get feedback in real time based on interactions is also a really interesting thing. I mean, you mentioned Embark, right? They have an entire strategy around how do you make sure that you have a culture of happy people? Because if your employees are happy, it guarantees success inside of your clients. And that has played out for them time and time again. Well, they're trying to figure out leading, lagging indicators and insights in their interactions, both internally and externally, that help those people ensure that that's something that's not just woven into culture, it's showing up in their behavior, or even identify things that might be happening that might make it counter to that. And so AI is also really, really amazing at that. It can take this meeting that we're having here and immediately give us insights into how well did we do in this conversation? What did we learn about that? Were there indicators that say, oh, Thomas didn't really like when you said that, or that didn't really go as we wanted, or that might be telling you something that someone was concerned about it, even though they didn't voice it. And then create this really immediate feedback cycle that tells someone about that interaction, places that they need to maybe change, questions they should ask better. I mean, all of those things start to change our interactions with people. Hopefully, they make us more emotionally intelligent. So our EQ goes up in order to get outcomes we want. But that's another really cool thing of AI because at the end of the day, people run companies. And we need people who are executing in their very highest levels in order to get the outcomes that we want. And if we can use AI to help our people continue on their path of learning, that's a phenomenal way to use it also.
I couldn't agree more. I think two things. A, I'm not sure that all businesses have either recognized or really been willing to put the resources towards the disruption that AI represents. So that's first. But also, I don't think they recognize, and you were showing this earlier when we were talking, the change in growth. So when we were talking about how growth had changed and really picked up pace over the last number of years because of AI. I don't know if you still have that slide there, but that to me needs to be really presented well to leadership so they can see that these changes are not only going to come, but they're coming at a much faster pace.
So much faster. I mean, we've always known that Moore's law and this doubling effect was applied in technology. We've talked about it for decades. But this, what's happening with scaling today is so, I mean, look at that. It's 4 times more in the last decade than it was in all times before that, even as technology was creating these massive, almost doubling effects. And this is really just beginning. And it's an interest, transformation in technology always happens when there becomes a perfect storm of things that have been unlocked. And a lot of work goes into making those happen. But things like computation power, both in the palm of our hands on our own machines. I mean, it's the reason that you see the NVIDIA chips and everyone's trying to, we've got a battle of the chips going on. I think they're no longer called GPUs, they're NPUs because of the work that they're trying to do, not just the graphical processing, but actually the computation power. So we have the ability to have massive amount of computation power, really quantum calculations in immediate time. We have the ability to take terabytes and terabytes of data that we're creating every day, bring that in, use that to create memory and context. And all of those things are now just at this perfect moment in time. I mean, I remember early days of like when I was working on things with computer vision and some of the intelligence things. Those were very early days of AI, but we had to break through all of these things in order to hit this moment in time where the evolution is happening. And people are really talking about the fact that generative AI is going to be one of the most transformative tech advancements in history. And the grounding of that is coming from this ability to generate original content, misspelling or there, automate complex tasks, and create economic value. If you watch some of the economic value predictions that are happening because of AI, they're astronomical to creating value inside of ecosystems. And we're at the very, very beginning right now, the very beginning.
So how does a company begin to start to take advantage of that within their own processes and their own opportunities by way of innovation with their products or services, and of course, their own operational efficiency?
The way I look at where we're at with AI today is it is really possible for AI to be part of anything, any component of your business. There are easier places to start, to be honest, right? Some of the AI like insights that you need or that you're going to want to build are going to require development work or really more sophisticated talent. There's some really great baseline things to happen today. I mean, I've seen a number of even just help desks inside of organizations deploy AI, which is interesting because it's reducing their help desk tickets in half. And so they've gone in and they've integrated them in with even things like password reset. It tends to be something in lots of companies where millions of help desk calls come. Okay, well, if you can automate that and someone can just hit and interact with AI to do things like that, you start to reduce the amount of labor that you need in your help desk, the amount of hours that you have to have coverage, and your tickets overall and their resolution time. So really simple ways to do that because there's a ton of technology in that. And we tend to already have as companies lots of knowledge that we can feed a system so it knows how to do things like that along the way. I mean, of course, there's the baseline like Chat GPT, right? Everyone can use that today. My recommendation is that you should try to use AI personally every day because until you understand kind of how it works, it's hard to imagine all the business scenarios that it helps you in. I mean, I use it all the time. I used it as far as I had 2 spreadsheets and someone's like, hey, do we know what the difference is between those? Or do these tell us common information? Because they were 2 different years of information. They didn't even ask the same questions. I just went to a data analyst GPT inside of Chat GPT. And I said, here's 2 spreadsheets. Tell me the top 3 insights that are aligned between both of them. That's all I said. I gave it like the most basic prompt. Like I don't even have time to think about what a really great prompt is on this. And I simply said, tell me the top 3 insights as you compare these 2 spreadsheets. And it produced a whole set of really helpful insights across the 2 spreadsheets by me doing almost nothing except for uploading 2 files. And so you just have to be willing, I think, to jump in and use it. And that in and of itself starts to unlock interesting things. Because if I don't have to personally go do all the computation work, say, let me open this file, let me see if there's common elements of these, right? And I'm just like, just let like this computer go do the work. And I got really powerful results back, which then starts to unlock other ways that you think about it. And sometimes I think we're just afraid of doing that.
Yeah, yeah, and I couldn't agree more. And I would also suggest that even with respect to this case where you put in a couple of files, that it could query. Most companies don't have a lot of the kind of data they need because they haven't produced the kind of data they need for that, or they've siloed it in different
Yep.
areas of the organization. Whereas if you use different tools, and you were talking about tickets, customer service as an example, and you're actually gauging those conversations between agents and even with your chatbots and customers, and then you can go back and do the analysis against that data using ChatGPT and AI in general, you get those opportunities and you can see those insights. There's no way you would see otherwise. And I think
Yep.
that's a big part of it. People don't
Yep.
realize, right, that when we're recording these sessions and when there's so much opportunity in that process other than just transcription. And I think that's a big opportunity for organizations to take advantage of.
Yeah, you're reminding me of, two things. So I'm big in product validation, right? How do I know if what I'm building someone will actually use it? And so I wanted to create a product validation AI to say, hey, when I'm talking to a customer and trying to figure out if someone will actually buy what I'm building, and we built it on top of a platform in less than a day to create like what do you follow my validation methodology and would someone buy that? That's really cool. Like because that's something really important to me. And I wanted the systematic data from that. So we built it on top of the Soar engine to be able to pull that out.
Right.
So the other thing that I think is really so I use that all the time. I'm like, oh, I should have all of my own AIs on top of things that I care about or models that I'm thinking about. But I also see if anyone has dev teams, they should also fully be using AI. If when I talk to my developer friends, those who have implemented AI will tell you they're coding 10 times faster than they ever did historically. So
Right.
if you look at what's happened with GitHub and the GPTs inside of GitHub and the ability for those engines to learn how you code, be able to do things for you. They are doing more coding work than they ever thought possible, like 10 times more. And some of my best, like favorite developers, when I sit and talk to them, I'm like, if you can be 10 times faster, do you know how much innovation we can create inside of that? And that's powerful because that also means the speed of creativity, which is what I really think is at the core of engineering, the speed of creativity, the ability to innovate that has also accelerated at a pace we have never seen before.
So all this brings about, with this amazing conversation, how do we get more ladies and women involved in this process and get energized by this conversation that we're having? And how do we get companies to pay more attention to that opportunity and that pool of talent that they're not taking advantage of for many reasons. Many live in a myopic box and they just generally feel like their IT department should all be males. So that happens, right? But
Sure.
how can we change that?
I mean, this is a very complex problem. I'm still going to say that, but I think that what it definitely requires is an entirely different approach and mindset to it. I think
Yes.
one of the other things that I might argue is an unlock is that for this new level of AI, the order and priority of the skills you hire for has changed.
Yeah.
And so that means that as you hire people, you also have to be open to people who come from untraditional paths, but that could be superstars in new ways. Now, I think that's really hard for a lot of people because people like to look at resumes and say, do you check all the boxes? And if you checked all the boxes, then I'm putting you in that job. But when you approach a new innovation that's transforming the world, should we not also approach our hiring in a different way and say, well, these are the skills that if someone possesses, allows them to be a superstar in this new area? I was talking with a woman yesterday, and we were talking about her pathway into technology. And she said, my pathway into technology was I graduated from college with a biology degree. I was a physics teacher in high school for 6 years, and I wanted to break down the door and get into technology. And today she is a product manager, a scrum master inside of a tech company. And someone had to drag her through that door in order for her to have that because the opportunity wasn't going to naturally come. There's no way she could put her resume in to a whole bunch of companies and get that opportunity. And she's crushing it in her job. And so, what does that mean? It means that we might also have to remove our thought barriers around the boxes we check for jobs that we put people into. If the skill sets demanded in the world today are different, it means the way that we hire and evaluate talent should also change, because that's one of the fastest ways to change the landscape of the type of people you have in an organization.
Couldn't agree more. I would add to that, just flipping back to what we were talking about earlier, the ability to take this very process that we're doing and then analyze the skills and the talents that are coming across from the individuals within these conversations, otherwise known as videos, and be able to see the talent that we might not ordinarily see just by having that discussion is got to be incredibly powerful to that end.
I think so. I think, one of the we have these perceptions for what paths are or what people are supposed to do, which I think sometimes block us from seeing the potential of individuals in different roles. And a lot of times people aren't willing to take a chance on those. So to your point, how do we use AI to unlock that capability so we see people in a different light? I think about this all the time. People that you worked with 15 years ago, they still, if you've never worked with them again, they see you in the same box they saw you 15 years ago, but you changed, your skill sets changed, you evolved. Or if someone sees you in a community role versus a company role, they think about you in one individual box, but it doesn't represent the whole of the skills that you have. So it's an interesting question to pose. How do we help people see that all of the talent that an individual has and the contribution that they can make in a company in a way that isn't our traditional methodology of evaluating talent?
Yeah, and that said, companies like Sherm, who are using cutting edge AI in that sense, and actually adding insights to their process that they can put in place on behalf of their clients and their customers, provide some of that insight and give us that opportunity to be able to see those talents we might not otherwise easily see or recognize as being valuable in that process.
Yeah, well, and to add into that, when I think a lot about leadership, because a lot of this comes down to what do we expect from our leaders and how do we train them? And we had an opportunity to work with Stephen Covey on the Trust and Inspire stuff. And in the Trust and Inspire, he will tell you that it's this whole continuum of how do we move leaders from command and control to really leading with trust and inspire. Well, also only 8% of leaders are actually on the continuum of trust and inspire. The whole
Right.
rest of the population is sitting in command and control, which is what, like something like 62% or something, and like 38% or whatever the numbers are enlightened command and control. What that tells you is we haven't really evolved our leadership styles at the same pace that innovation or teams demand. And part of that comes because history tells us that if you lead this way, this is how you get results and they're predictable. But the world changes and the world is rapidly changing. It's way more connected today. And our speed of changing leadership styles is not changing at the same pace. And so, to your point, how do we then use AI to develop stronger leaders, to create new competencies that might be more valued today or that might be added to the mix of us as leaders? Well, you do it by taking models like that say, oh, hey, to be a leader more on the continuum of trust and inspire, because we're seeing thought leaders do this, like Stephen M.R. Covey, and saying, okay, well, to do that, these skills are the ones that you have to develop. Well, how do you develop them? We tell you in real time how you show up as a leader. We give you feedback. We, in real time, say, hey, you should maybe think about wording something this way, or here's a suggestion for how you do this, or here's how you scored in the last meeting that you held. You did a very, very bad job. And okay, no one's ever going to totally say that. They're just going to say you need to improve on these things. But that's the continuum we're trying to change, right? Is how do you use AI, develop us as people to become better, to create faster learning, faster growth, and you do it by using technology this way.
I'm thinking to myself as we have this conversation, and I know I've spoken to HR firms about this in the past, and I don't know if Sherm is considering this as well. But can you imagine the opportunity where AI did most of the recruiting and went through the process of actually the interviews with people, and obviously in leadership roles still playing a role, but AI rather than those boxes that leaders tend to try and put people into, evaluated people on the basis of some of the skills that we're talking about, creativity, the ability to add the insights and the different elements that we want from people to be effective in business today versus 20 years ago, right? Which people are
Yeah.
missing. Can you imagine the impact that would have? I mean, just from the standpoint of I've got 300 resumes to go through. right? Just that basic process. AI can take care of much of that. In fact, AI would probably tell you, don't go through that process in that matter in the first place.
Well, for sure. I mean, I would totally agree with you on that. There's a report that's coming out shortly, and it was looking at high school girls and their aptitude for STEM fields.
Right,
And the data says that by and far, the majority of girls have the aptitude for STEM,
right.
but they do not pursue STEM careers because of all of these other things. So imagine that if we could figure out how to reinforce what is already a natural aptitude for most people, the opportunities that they have in different career paths, because it's other things that get in the way and that stop them from pursuing that, but it's not because they don't have the capability. And I think what you're asking or you're thinking about is what's the capability that people have and how do we embrace the capabilities they have versus the box that they got put into from whatever decisions or navigation that their life took them on.
Yeah. And often
I'm
if
always
that
a big believer of like accelerate opportunities for people, like bring them faster than you were, find other ways, like recognize their talent. And our number one job as leaders is to identify someone's talent and then find ways for that to really be able to be leveraged inside of organizations, regardless of where their history came from.
couldn't agree more. I mean, when you talk about things like Clifton reports vis-a-vis Gallup and
Mhm.
that whole process, that really further illuminates that. And if you added AI to that, which we're doing, and actually brought that to bear by way of the recruiting process and the development process in terms of leadership, as you were discussing, the impact could be enormous and rapidly.
Yep, absolutely.
And I and I
That's exactly what we got to lean into. I mean, you and I have talked about this many times and the things that we think about all the time, because this is a really I think there's a really interesting unlock happening in AI too, where you have models like ChatGPT, which has a lot of the open available information. And we're now in this evolution of how do you apply AI into specific domains or specific content? And in some cases, like what we're talking about, HR, human capital development, leadership development, what you want are proven models and insights that really smart people have thought about and figured out help make people better. Find AI to those so that you unlock the next level. And a lot of that is taking brilliant thought leaders' content and unlocking that in a very rapid fashion and really applying basically AI to almost any content domain. It's the proprietary domains that I think unlock the most value versus just the generic content. That's why we have so many large language models and even small language models coming up.
Right, which makes two points, but I'll jump on the obvious one, and that is that because of its disruptive nature and the speed by which it came to market, it actually jumped a lot of the legalities that many other businesses will run into in the coming years with respect to that. But the opportunity for that is just enormous.
Agreed. Agreed. And I think we're at a really interesting time to unlock all of that.
Right. Is it fair to say that most companies today are missing, in my mind, the biggest single element to all of this, and we haven't even talked about it as yet, and that is that AI, in most cases, depending upon how it's managed and brought in, assuming that it's brought in on purpose in the first place, is very cost effective to bring in, and B can also save a lot of money and costs within any business at any area that you want to bring it in.
I mean, absolutely. And there's going to be some innovation which takes an investment in developing in order to get there. It's going to be a given. But if you have so many just basic ways to pull in AI today that can help lift your business. And what you find is that the more you introduce it, the more your organization up levels to continue to use it in other more sophisticated ways. And so it just makes a ton of sense to start doing that. And you're seeing all sorts of really interesting things happen. If you even look at what Microsoft is announcing, they've now woven AI into the core Windows operating system. I mean, we're
Right.
in like we're in a race for every company out there, right? When you've got the Facebook guys trying to create an AI search and every prompt search I do there, which is currently not working for me. You've got Google, which is now, put it inside of like every search result that you put inside of Google. You've got Chat GPT. These are really like just baseline things. It's really the next level that you really have to go to, and organizations have to adopt it. The interesting thing is, if you don't adopt it, your people are already going to use it anyway. So you should just figure out your strategy so that you're the empowering entity to make them better versus just getting drug along or being afraid of it. And because the more that you understand it, the more you can also make sure that you secure it, because we do care about proprietary information. None of
Mhm.
us want the data that's held inside of our companies to go into the overall engine of chat GPT that everyone else gets to learn from. That's why these LLMs are being created with proprietary information that's not going in to chat GPT. That's why we're creating dev environments that are held to just me and my organization versus everyone else. I actually think that's another critical thing, is that you really understand how your IP is getting used inside of that, and make sure that you're using tools that where that's true so that you're creating the protection for it.
Yeah, no, no, agreed. When I look at companies and how they're leveraging technology today, I would guesstimate that somewhere between 40 and 60% of the technology they're using, they don't even know they're using, because one department is using this type of technology, another's using that, and so on. So they've got a technology stack within most organizations that's out of control. And better utilizing that stack in combination with AI would immediately cover most of, if not all of those costs, and give them the opportunity to start to take advantage of the insights that AI can provide them by integrating all of those elements within their business. So there's just an enormous opportunity. And for me, if I'm a business owner and I look at opportunities like what SHRM is promoting with their new insight modules, as well as companies like Embark and what they've been able to do with their goal to ensure a certain level of happiness, if you can gauge that, with their employees and the culture they've created around that. I think the opportunity that AI provides in that context is just astounding. And I think the more companies get their brains around that. And what happens is, the further we go with that, the less important gender is in the first place.
That's right.
All of
It
that
starts to
evaporates.
create some equalization. Yeah, I mean, I think we'll still have to solve our like leadership gender issues, but
Yeah.
agreed. Think that the thing that you're talking about is fairly easy for companies to bring in. Yeah, I think the opportunity, say, like your Embark example, the ability for them to roll out an AI solution that is around the thing that's core to them, it's very, very fast. And I think that's really powerful, to your point of your total cost, your adoption curves, and the ability for that insight and the model to be applied and rapidly applied and then deployed. I mean, it's almost instantaneous. And that's really powerful. Give it, in a couple of days, you can create your entire like prompt engineering on top of AI that would enable all of that to be available to all of the employees. That's pretty powerful. We're not talking about a 6 to 9 month implementation cycle. We're talking about days and weeks.
And I think that's what most people miss, because they're so fearful of some of the risks that they've misunderstood, that they're not taking those initial steps. And that's where
That's
the
right.
the opportunity really lies. Well,
Agreed.
Sydney, it's been an incredible conversation. We've covered a great deal of ground with today's conversation. I'm really looking forward to seeing if AI can change the landscape, not just by way of technology, but by way of getting more women involved in the technology. I've got two young daughters myself, and they're both heavy in technology, so they've both actually done quite well with it. But they're both hitting some of these obstacles that we've talked about within the organizations that they're in, and they're both finding ways to work around that through their frustration. So I hear it directly from them in that regard. So I see there's nothing but opportunity there, but we do have to change those mindsets.
Agreed. Agreed. There's a ton of great opportunity. And I actually love the thinking around how do we even more aggressively use AI to help us with gender diversity across our organizations. That's, a really powerful unlock if we could do that.
Well, in general, AI wouldn't have that bias. So the only way it gets that bias is by us giving it in the first place, based upon the models that we're going to work it with. Other than that,
Exactly.
it shouldn't have that bias.
Right, but it does simply because we created that bias from how our existing operating models are.
Yes. So we have to remove that. Well,
Exactly.
thank you so much for your time today, Sydney. It was just an amazing conversation, and I very much appreciate it. And I look
Thanks for
forward to,
having me.
yes, and I look forward to more influencer presentations and discussions happening with on the basis of our Soar series here that will be rolling out in the weeks and months to come. Thank you again, Sydney, and everybody, please have a fabulous week, and thank you for joining us.